Rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Cheryl, the roll, please.
Joe Burden.
Here.
Dennis Gagnon.
Here.
Peter Lewis. Laura O'Connell. Neil Toman. Heidi Wendell. Here. Neil Zuckerman.
Here. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the November 2024 meeting of the Philipstown Planning Board. I have two remarks to make before we get started. The first is that when I was looking at I was actually talking to a gentleman who runs the Hyde Park, New York Planning Board, and he said he's been doing this 19 years. And I went, I've been doing this a while too. And I realized it was actually, this month is the 5th anniversary of me chairing this board. And thank you. I wasn't looking at that for an applause, but my point was that it is an honor to lead this group. It's an honor to have you as my board members and our talented and persistent staff. I don't know what I'd do without Ron and Steve, who have been here throughout the whole duration that I've been on this board, actually, that 13-year stretch. So thank you very much for that. And I do want to say the second thing is, for everyone who was paying attention the last couple of weeks, we had an election in this country. And local and regional, national politics were debated. There's a great quote from Phil LaGuardia, who was a Republican, nominally to some people, but he was a Republican. And Andrew Cuomo, when he helped rebuild, LaGuardia was fond of having quotes from LaGuardia strewn across some of the parts of the airport. And the one I always like is there's, as LaGuardia said, there's no Democratic or Republican way to pick up the garbage. Well, I don't know the political persuasions of my peers on this board, but we are here to help pick up the garbage. I mean, that's odd, and I live in Garrison, so we don't actually have professional garbage. We have private garbage, but the sentiment nonetheless is the case that we're here to help and do business. And so government moves on at the most local level here in Philipstown and other places that are like it. So thank you all, and let's get started. All right, thank you. Let's start with the approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Laura. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Joe. Any comments, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Okay, Cheryl, just walk through the highlights of the correspondence, please.
Okay. First one is 6-month extension request for Golinczak, Crest Road.
Okay.
You want me to read the letter?
No, I don't think you need to read the letter. But, Steve, do you have any comments on the request for an extension?
Yes. Last meeting, there was this same request, and I advised the board that it could not be granted because it was not timely. The permit had expired. However, I overlooked that in, let's say March, maybe May, the board had granted an extension, the first extension on this. So the permit was still viable when the application came in for the 6-month extension, and it really, since there have been no change in circumstances, should have been granted by the board last month. So it's appropriate for the board at this time to take action to grant this extension. As I said, there's been no change in circumstances, and it's, I won't say as of right, but it's the type of thing that the board's really, pretty much beholden to do.
Okay. My reading of this note, I guess the only part of the request which comes from Glenn's office is the owner is currently developing the construction documents, which are 90% complete currently. Jason, you want to say something about it? Please.
He has, in fact, Jason Snyder with Beatty and Watson. He did apply for his building permit.
Okay.
On Tuesday.
Okay.
So, and the bid, it's going out to bid on Monday. So this is the last.
Okay.
This is the last extension that we would need.
In my firm, when we have an election for our CEO, and each successive election, the current CEO has to have a higher and higher percentage of the votes to stay in. It's like 50% the first round, then like the third round's like 75%. So the bar's going to get higher if this keeps going.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I can deal with that.
Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye on the extension. Aye, aye, all opposed, extension, abstentions, motion passes. You have your extension, sir. Okay, escrow, stepping stones. Anything, Ron, from you on stepping stones and the return of escrow?
Yeah, in the last month, we were directed to go out to the site. I've issued a memorandum advising that all required site improvements have been accomplished so that the escrow can be returned.
Great, okay. So we have a motion to return the remaining escrow to stepping stones. Thank you, Heidi. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dennis. Discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, abstention, motion passes. Scanga, same thing, escrow. Ron.
And that's in the same situation. In the last month, he received a memo from me to confirm that all site improvements have been accomplished. So it's appropriate that escrow be returned.
Okay. Motion. Thank you, Joe. Second. Thank you, Heidi. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, Automar Conservation Board. Do we have anyone from the Conservation Board here tonight? No? Yeah, why don't you read it for us, Cheryl?
Dear Chairman Zuckerman and members of the Planning Board, during the October 8th Conservation Board meeting, the architect from the above-mentioned project presented their proposed plans. The CB has significant concerns about this proposal because of its potential to adversely impact the Philipstown aquifer, the Clove Creek, including this watercourse's floodplain. The applicant is requesting permission to install fuel tanks, a retail building, and a multi-use structure, which the CB's initial thoughts are this may be too intensive development for this site. The CB currently believes that the presented plans are of inadequate detail. Additionally, Phase 2 of the project proposes an industrial solar array on the east side of Clove Creek. Because of this part of the proposal, it's projected to be done in the future, and that's in quotes. The CB suggests that this be handled by the Planning Board as a separate application. The CB would like to request that the Planning Board not act on this proposal until the CB is able to make a site visit. The CB has asked the applicant to update their plans to include the complete septic system, delineate wetlands, watercourses, and their buffers, and the Clove Creek floodplain on updated plans. For the CB site visit, we have requested that the footprint of all buildings, paved areas, fuel tanks, and septic be clearly flagged, and that the project engineer is on site at the time of the CB visit. Thank you, Andy Galler, Chair.
Thank you. Any comment on that, Steve?
I think it's appropriate for the board to pause processing of the application till the CB has a chance to investigate and report.
Okay. Any comments, board members?
Having the future work as a separate application, I think is prudent.
Okay. No, I assume no action is necessary to be taken at this point.
No, they're not before you tonight, so
Okay.
you can just wait and see how it goes. You may receive the report before they ask to be back on the agenda.
Okay. All right, great. So let's move to Hudson Highlands Reserve. Is anyone here from Hudson Highlands Reserve that wants to talk about the topic?
Good evening,
Hi.
Mr. Zuckerman.
Yes, hi.
Judson Siebert of Keenan Bean PC, representing the applicant. Last month, the board opened and closed a public hearing with regard to the steep slopes a permit application, and we are here tonight, hopefully to have a.
Can you come closer to the mic?
Yeah, I apologize. I'd raise it too, but, you know, somebody might
Whatever
come
you
after
gotta
me. No, that's good. So I'll start all over again. Judson Siebert, Keenan Bean PC, on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Zuckerman, we were here last month. A public hearing was opened and closed with regard to the steep slopes permit sought by the applicant. And we are here tonight anticipating hopefully a disposition with regard to that permit by way of a resolution approving it.
All right, well, let's just cover that off. I mean, I was not here last month. The board directed Ron to prepare the resolution. I have that in front of me. I will take a vote on it, but I don't want to, I assume there's no opposition, but let me just take a vote, make a motion, a second, and we'll just have any discussion if needed. So, motion to approve and sign the resolution for the steep slopes permit.
I'll make that.
Thank you, Dennis. Second? Second on the steep slopes permit? Thank you, second. All right, discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Okay.
Neil, I just caught some typos in it, just channeling Kim, so I don't know if you want to just pass that down. They don't change the meaning, but
No, it's, let me just, I'm sure I can hand adjust these. I'll insert an S, NJZ. I'll remove that. NJZ. Anything else? The two? Okay. You don't have a problem with this, Steve, do you, this hand editing?
If they're just grammatical changes.
They are just
they're
grammatical.
not substantive, then I don't
I
have
think
a
she's removing the shall and she's writing shan't in a couple. Just kidding, I was just joking.
I circled conservation
I was
subdivision.
joking,
but
I was
You
joking.
don't have to make a change. I would like that deleted.
Okay,
I'm sure I'm,
just a little joke. After 11 years together, Ulysses, allow me a couple of humorous points. All right, so let me just sign this. Okay. Ron, why don't you just provide us a status of where the rest of the application is?
Actually, that most recently has been done by AKRF through
Oh,
Aaron.
sorry.
Yeah.
Aaron?
So I have a memo that was issued September 13th. I haven't updated it since then. It pretty much outlines the fact that there's several conditions that are part of that September 21st, 2023 resolution where you granted preliminary approval of the subdivision. There's several conditions in there that you wanted to see met in order to issue a final approval. And there's a few of those that are pretty critical, including the town board getting the conservation easement agreement in place with the applicant, the HOA documents being in acceptable form to both the planning board and the town board. There's a few others that might be flexible, but those are really important ones. And there's also the Automar Pond Management Plan, which the applicant indicated was forthcoming a couple months back. Our firm would be able to review that and provide comment once it's ready, but that's an important piece too, because it's part of the HOA and the mitigation from the EIS. So, yeah, I mean, there's several conditions that the applicant's aware of. They just, you granted a 6-month extension last month, I believe, on the preliminary, or 2 months ago. So they're still working through those. But they did submit a letter to try to get approval for cutting some trees in the winter.
Okay. Yeah, we'll cover that in a second. I wasn't asking about the tree piece. Have you seen the fire department's comments on, you've seen it? Okay. Any response? You want to comment on it?
With regard to the fire department's letter, I read it when it first came out. I didn't read it today, but there's nothing that, the homeowners association will take responsibility for keeping the emergency access ways clear and locked, and we didn't see anything inside that was undoable.
I think his other 2 points were ensuring that the aforementioned steep slope, steep grade will be properly maintained in clear and appropriate timing, especially in poor weather conditions. And thirdly, sprinkler system, we're looking forward to further information, the type of system that will be installed.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, well, while we stand there, Glenn, I know you've made a request for tree removal, so you just maybe you want to give us the trim version of what you're asking for.
Well, it's really just a matter of timing. We really want to have the winter to do that tree removal. We've limited to, I think it's 172 trees within the infrastructure area only. That means the road, I think the septic system is clear, but the roads and, 90% of it's the roads and a couple of other spots. But we'd like to get that done so when we do get final approval, we can move forward.
So if we didn't approve the tree removal, when would the tree removal occur?
It would occur after final approval.
And so when is that going to happen in time? I mean,
Well, I really think we need to get into that discussion about the conditions.
well, that's why that's why I asked Aaron where we are, because it sounds like there's several things that need to still be done.
And there is not one of them that isn't normally a condition of final approval. For instance, and probably the most glaring example, is one of the conditions is to pay the rec fees before you accept the application for final approval. That's, frankly, it's a little outlandish to do that. Health Department approval for all of my 53 years before this board is a condition of final approval. So these all migrated into the preliminary
Did
approval.
we change anything, or is this standard practice, either Ron or Aaron?
Yeah, these typically are in final. They were brought forward for preliminary at the time. So they would normally be appropriate for the final approval, which they'll be seeking shortly.
I think we'll have to just discuss that, and I'm happy to discuss offline what may have changed. I don't know if this is something with AKRF helping us. I don't know I can't describe what the origin of it is. Let's engage in discussion as a board about your request, because I think that's untethered to what's in final versus preliminary approval, at least at this moment. I don't think we're capable of having that discussion.
In terms of the request for tree removal you're speaking of, we're just reiterating an earlier request that we would like to take the trees out where the infrastructure will be constructed. We're willing to post a reclamation bond in the case there's a failure. But we need the time. I mean,
So what is a reclamation bond?
it's exactly the same that as you just demanded of Shakespeare. It's a fail-safe source of money to go in and reclaim the land if it's abandoned or if the project's not done.
But once the trees are removed, it's not like we can put back 50-year-old trees or whatever age they are.
That's true.
Okay, well, did you guys want to add something? You were talking down, anything you want to add on the earlier topic?
Restoration bonding?
No, well, either, whether it's the earlier topic of preliminary versus final approval or to this restoration bond, feel free to.
Now, again, many of those conditions that are being raised by the applicant would be more typically found only in final. The issue of posting a restoration bond is very typical in final, just to assure that the site can be restored by the town should the applicant abandon the project.
All right, let me get a motion and a second, then we can have a debate. So can I have a motion to allow for the tree removal that's being requested? No motion? Okay, I do not hear a motion for the tree removal. Now, I will say the following. I think it'll be important for me to take this topic offline and happily discuss it with you too, Glenn, about what's preliminary versus final. But let me hit, because I think I have the sentiment of the board, and I'll allow certainly a conversation about it. I think the sentiment of the board is the following, and I can speak about a specific incident, at least in the top of my mind when this topic comes up. Pre-COVID, was that 403? No, during COVID? During COVID. A new home was going to be roughed in on 403. We were told that this is an important project for this family, this person, lots of personal details about the daughter was going to have something, and the project was not done. The neighbor bought the house, and we allowed some trees to be chopped down because of some animal was going to be nesting at some period of time, and this board has actually felt pretty crummy about that decision since. And I'd submit to you that a reclamation bond for something that could be repaired makes perfect sense. This is not a reparable topic. You can't repair tree. You can plant new ones, I guess, but then wait 50 years. So I think generally we are not a big fan of that topic. Now I'll let my colleagues speak, please, if they want to.
I'm joining in everything you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense. And we don't know when these other pieces are gonna come into place either.
We actually felt burnt from that last situation, that we were sort of,
I know the story.
not lied to, but sort of was misrepresented, and it,
Well, I think, I will just offer this, and just as a retort. First of all, there was no reclamation bond. And second of all, I think that the applicant has more than fairly demonstrated his staying power with regard to this project.
I think that latter is a fair point. We've been all at this together for quite some time. So we don't have a motion, and then we certainly don't have a second, so I think we're going to have to move on from that topic. All right, Glenn, thank you for that. Thank you for the request and the thoughtfulness. Okay, hearing any more business on this topic?
No, if I can just weigh in again.
You said no. There's no more business on this topic.
Yeah,
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
please.
Yeah, no, it is yes in the sense that I just want to underscore the request of the applicant to examine that preliminary approval and to view it through the lens of what is ordinarily done with regard to these conditions.
twice.
We need to, We've got some that are clearly, it's kind
It
of
was a
backwards.
topic not
Yeah.
raised, at least to me.
Okay.
And this is the
So
first
I-
I promise you, I've said it.
We welcome that
I
opportunity.
promise you, like, I'm kind of a fact-based kind of duty, honor, country kind of guy. We will take a look at it in the next couple of weeks, okay? I promise you that. And if we need to do a session between AKRF and my legal eagle and you
yeah,
guys, we'll just do that offline, if
Yeah,
that's
and
okay.
That's fine if we
Yeah,
could,
let's
if we
just
can
do that.
be on the December agenda, because I would like to keep with regard.
I don't know if we're gonna be having a December meeting. That will be something we have to discuss at, is that on our new business? We'll have to, let someone remember to have that at the end, please. We'll come back to that time. But regardless, between now and next, like, after Thanksgiving, we'll all get together. Maybe we can even get it done next week. The 5 of us can talk, or 6, or whatever, right group.
Yeah. And we understand that on final approval, public hearing on a subdivision is an optional thing, and it's usually exercised when there's been a significant change in the plans, especially since you may not meet in December and we may be into January. We'd like to ask you to schedule a public hearing now, if you're going to have it, but more often we think we're in we are substantially in compliance with the original plan, and we'd like to know that we don't have to have it.
Sorry, you want to request a public hearing? You
No,
said-
I would
You want
want
to
you
request
to.
to
I
not
want you
have
to-
one?
I want you to decide not to have it.
I'm not ready to have that discussion. I mean, unless you feel, Steve, it's right for us as a board to have that discussion now.
Well, on subdivisions of this size, I mean, putting aside the acreage, it's 24 lots. Normally, because it's optional, you would not have a second public hearing in regard to final approval. I don't think, other than coming back to do the steep slopes approval, there's been any change to this project since the preliminary was granted, at least no substantive one. So, it's, of course, it's up to the board, and maybe Ron feels differently, but I don't see a reason why you would need to have another public hearing on this.
Anyone else think, Ron, do you think differently?
No, I'm in agreement with Steve.
I would say there's been immense public interest in the project, and that if a public hearing is a possibility, I think we should hold one, because we've come this far. I mean, it seems to me that the public may want to speak. I mean, you can always give the cautionary, your cautionary words, that please don't tread over all ground that's already been tread, and keep it short, et cetera. But maybe nobody will show up and it'll be quick. But I think because this room has been filled, packed with people interested in the project, I think we owe it to the public to have a public hearing.
Well, let me just get a straw poll here first. I feel like we're having a discussion. I don't want to interrupt the flow.
I don't think it's necessary.
I guess my question is like, what do you gain from the public hearing?
You want to say
Like,
more?
I mean,
What haven't we heard?
yeah, I guess that's what my question is.
Joe?
I agree with Heidi. I think a public hearing would be beneficial for the community.
Steve, do we have to make a decision on this at this moment, or is this something we can?
No, it's an optional public hearing. You don't have to make a motion to waive it. You would have to make a motion to hold it, if that's what the board decides that it wants to ultimately do. So what Glenn is saying is, if you're going to hold one, please schedule it for January now.
Sorry, Glenn,
I think
just-
other than, the HOA and the agreement and the HOA document and the conservation easement, there really isn't all that much outstanding on this.
Yeah, let me build on what both Laura and Dennis posited, which is along the way we've had public hearings to discuss secra, to discuss change to the layout, what is the topic we would be discussing besides a general weighing in on the project at this moment? Is there a quote-unquote topic? Is it the final, like, what is the discussion we're trying to get input on? That wasn't rhetorical, that was a
Well,
question.
there was a hearing on the preliminary as well that happened before your September 2023 resolution was issued. So, like Steve was saying, if there hasn't been any changes since that preliminary as far as the layout and the project in general, the public hearing would more or less be what you heard last time.
So I can, go ahead, please, Heidi.
Well, I was just gonna say, but we're talking about two major pieces of the project that were of great interest to the public, the conservation easement and the HOA, that could be discussed.
But you don't get to weigh in on the conservation easement, just the HOA.
All right, so the HOA. I mean, a lot of people have been speaking about the details of this project. They should have a chance to speak. I really think, what are we doing? We're here for the public.
I hear you. All right, let's do this. I think I got a split vote among my board. Let's get a motion for a public hearing in January. Okay, moved, second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I'm gonna be the split vote. I feel like I'm in the movie 1776 here. I'm gonna vote aye on a public hearing because I think the notion is that in the era of more transparency versus less, I tend to agree. At the same point, I do agree with our colleagues in the minority that there's not much to discuss, but if our friends who live on East Mountain Roads, north and south, or other places. You're up there, so maybe you'll step down and make a statement. Otherwise, it'll be relatively quick, and I would love your help, Ron and Aaron, to curtail the topic upon which we're gonna discuss. If that's HOA, great, if there are other topics, but in order to make this a more valuable, let's keep it tailored. I don't wanna start having a conversation about the pond and this and that, and, then it gets a little bit, far afield. So if we can, yes, ma'am.
Will it be December if there's a December meeting?
Good question. So actually, then let's pause, if you don't mind. Why don't we just have that motion about a December meeting? I must admit, despite being on this board now a decade and change, I can't actually remember if we typically have one in December or not. Stop laughing at me, Liz. You're gonna be up here soon. All right. Anyway. Yeah, it's a threat. That's a threat. Anyway, can you weigh in, my friends with long memories? Do we usually have a December meeting?
We have and we haven't. Yeah,
Depends on what's on the
it's a
agenda.
mix.
If there's a lot of things, then usually we do, but if there's just one or two.
What's the date what would be the date of our normal meeting?
It's the week before Christmas.
Twas the week before Christmas?
It'll be the 19th.
The 19th. Okay, let's see. I'm in town. Is anyone else in town? I think that's actually usually when we get our $10 gift certificate from our board members, so that's an incentive to come in. Is everyone around?
I'm going to my father's funeral in
Oh,
St.
I'm
Louis.
so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I probably won't be here.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Laura, are you in town? Are you in town, Dennis?
As it stands right now, yes.
Are you in town?
Yeah, the 19th?
Yeah? Okay. What do you guys think? I see our general counsel is raising his eyebrows over there.
Well, if you had multiple things coming on, look, if you want to do it for this, of course, it's the
Do we have
board's-
anything, what do we think is going to be in the agenda?
Well, probably a lot of these same
Steve's gonna
topics.
mention they were gonna submit.
And
All right, so let's, all right, so I think we got four as barely a quorum. Hopefully Neil and Peter, one of them can join us, and we'll have five, a little bit of room. So unless we can't get a quorum, we'll have the meeting and we will schedule your public, so I would then suggest, let's go back to the other, so we're gonna have a December meeting then. Then I come back to, would you like a December public hearing?
December public hearing would be preferable, yes.
Okay, now Heidi, you're not gonna be there for it, but I promise you I'll run it as efficiently as I usually do. And, are we all in line on, Aaron, you wanna say something? Well, that's the conversation to be had.
Final subdivision approval is basically the
Go ahead,
topic.
you go.
Yeah, the topic is final subdivision approval, and there's a few conditions that required the planning board to weigh in. That includes the HOA documents, which were referred to the town board, I believe, already, and Steve is reviewing those. because we deferred to Steve on that. A lot of the stuff was from the EIS was in there. I was comfortable with it, but from a legal standpoint, I did ask Steve to take a look, and he advises the town board as well, so he was going to do that. And then this also being the first conservation easement or subdivision in the town with that pursuant to the zoning that was put in place, this will be the first conservation easement in a residential project, so that easement agreement with the town is also outstanding. So those are two important pieces, and tying into final subdivision approval, I guess it's the hearings covering those items and the adequacy of those for final approval.
I think it's better to enumerate them as much as we can.
Conservation easement and the HOA will be on the town board's agenda for the first December meeting. If I could, Neil, just real quick.
Please.
The thing to understand about preliminary and final subdivision approval is that the names under New York state law are a little misleading. When you have preliminary subdivision approval, you have almost very nearly a complete vested right, as far as how your subdivision is going to be set up. Final is just looking at the conditions that need to be met, and if there's some additional minor details that need to be, or there's been some major change in circumstances that go with it, that gets kind of put on at final. Preliminary establishes the subdivision, final just kind of finishes it off. There isn't an awful lot to talk about 99% of the time between a grant of preliminary subdivision and a grant of final subdivision, except for meeting the conditions and any outstanding issues. You say, for example, we're going to get DOH approval, or going to have DOT look at this and weigh in on something. You're talking about designing a curb cut, or the infrastructure improvements that are going to go in, but the subdivision itself is pretty much set at that point. So you're going to hold your public hearing on it, and that's fine. Like I say, you'll be able to discuss the HOA to the extent that there's anything to discuss about the HOA, but other than that, it's going to be a very narrow field of discussion based on any changes or additional conditions that should be imposed on the subdivision. You're not going to revisit the major issues that were already ironed out
I
in
think that's
grant
a
of
really
preliminary.
great point, Cheryl, that Steve just made. Additional conditions that would be appropriate. I think it may be a framing of it, because I don't want to have a discussion about how many houses go around the pond. We've decided that over and over again.
Can I just
Please.
ask one I wasn't quite sure, so I get it, the HOA will be a topic for the hearing, but it seemed like there was a little bit of disagreement as to whether the conservation easement, which I thought was a condition. Why can that not be discussed at the hearing?
Because it's the town board that approves the conservation easement, not this board. You can, if it was somebody other than the town board, this board would have the say as to whether it was not an acceptable holder of the easement. But easements are interest in real property, the town board decides that.
But there's also language to the conservation easement that we could discuss. I mean, I'm not saying we would have necessarily the right to change it, but we could try to clarify things if they're not clear to us.
I think what Steve's saying, it's not our purview. That's the town board's job.
So it's totally out of our jurisdiction
Well,
now?
unless they ask us to comment on it, I don't.
That's true, yeah. That could happen, I guess.
But sequentially, it doesn't work, because isn't it going to the town board in December?
Yeah.
So they're gonna already be meeting with it, and before it comes, before our board meeting.
Well, maybe it makes more sense to schedule this public hearing for January then. That way you can look at both.
I can go with it. I don't know if our review of the HOA is, the public will have a chance to weigh in on the HOA by topic. If we want to then be asked by the town board to look at it after the public hearing, I think the purpose of the public hearing is to hear the view on the HOA and or other items that should be mentioned in the final approval. I think,
With regard to the conservation easement,
yeah.
your secret finding statement delineated what that easement should encompass. Your preliminary approval references the conservation easement. You have a town code provision that references and makes explicit reference for the town, through the
No
town
one's
board to accept.
I
So-
think no one's disagreeing with that.
So we don't want to get, quite frankly, whipsawed. This is a town board decision.
We understand,
Yeah,
we agree.
right.
We've said that now multiple times up here. So I think I'm gonna suggest we stick with our plan, we'll stick with the December meeting. HOA, or if it becomes a huge topic that the public raises, I'm sure we can share our notes back with the town board if relevant. But I think we've got a lot of input over the years, a lot of public input. Okay. So December board meeting, we'll see you in December.
And Cheryl, you'll handle noticing and.
She's
I know.
a veteran and
She's-
expert at
yeah,
noticing.
Just
You
confirm.
have 6 minutes and 24 seconds to get it up, my God. All right, anything else on Hudson on Reserve? We have our December meeting scheduled. Okay, great.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Well, hold on. Can you come to the microphone, say who you are?
Hi, I am Ulysses Liceaga. I am the sponsor of the project, and it's not clear to me if I can cut the trees or not.
No, you cannot cut the trees. There was not even a motion to cut the
Okay,
trees.
so no one.
Obviously, I'm not doing a good enough job of explaining what we're doing up here. We did not, there was no motion, there was no second, so there's no vote.
Sorry, I was just confused.
Yes, I promise you, your second there will explain everything to you. He has got this down pat. Okay, thank you. All right, Krasniqi Plaza, no?
Sorry.
Oh, we changed order? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, okay, sorry. We'll do Shakespeare? Is that on my?
Yeah, I left you one too.
Oh, I'm sorry, you did give me a different, all right, sorry. Okay. Well, I think it's fine. So we had a site visit on Sunday. Lovely. We met the junior staffer from your law firm. She seemed very interested until she took off at one point.
My 11-year-old daughter was at the site visit, so for those who weren't there, it was her first site visit.
Did she enjoy it?
She liked it.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'm not sure you need to start at this unless you have something particular you want to ask about, but I thought, Ron, maybe you want to give us the minutes of our site visit.
Sure. As has been mentioned, Planning Board conducted a site visit on Sunday. The entire Planning Board was represented. Several members of the applicant's team was there, as well as 5 or 6 members of the general public. They attended. I think the board spent a fair bit of time at the site of the proposed artist housing. They understood the layout, design, the location on the property, and spent some time trying to understand visual impacts. I think the board was generally satisfied, given its setting, that it's not very readily apparent. You have filtered views of Storm King. I think there might have been one residence on Phillipsbrook Road that had a filtered view into the site. But the board understood the type of construction of the project, heights of the buildings, and seemed fairly satisfied to understand things. My memorandum just summarizes those comments for the record, so we can understand what's been said. 2 significant issues that came up during that site visit were discussion on the occupancy of the housing itself. Aaron went through that in some detail, and there was concern by some members of the board over the potential rules that would govern the tenant's use of the property external to the units. That again involves some interplay, some discussion between applicant's counsel and the board, and they have no problems providing those agreements to satisfy the board's concerns. Other than that, I've just summarized at the end of the memorandum the referrals that have been done. They're still outstanding in terms of a response. So at the close of that, the open issues would still be resolving the seeker issue as to whether the board is satisfied that it conforms with the prior finding statement that was issued on the overall master plan. And then secondarily, as indicated by the applicant, a public hearing should be scheduled.
Adam, you want to comment?
Sure. Adam Stollerow from Cy Paget and Roselle on behalf of the applicant. I just wanted to thank the board and staff for coming out and for everyone coming out. The whole board was there, which was great. And hopefully it gave everyone a good understanding of what we're dealing with. Ron Gaynor's memo, summarized the discussion that we had on site very well, I think. and some of the concerns that were raised. You know, as you heard from the applicant at the site visit, we're happy to put in place some rules governing use of the site, including where things are stored. I can tell you that, you know, the applicant does not want any kayaks or bikes stored outside in that area. They want them stored down by the rehearsal barns. So that'll be easy. But we would like to schedule a public hearing on the site plan for the next planning board meeting.
Board members, any other observations from the site plan you want, or the site visit you want to mention? Heidi?
I just was wondering in Ron's memo, I thought when we were there, the quiet hours, and I must just be misremembered, but I thought the quiet hour started at 10, not 10:30. Didn't Aaron read it at the site? I don't know.
He did read something, but.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Is it 10:30 or 10? I just want to make sure we get that correct. It can be checked later.
10:30 to 8.
10:30?
That's what I have, yeah. And that's from the finding
Okay.
statement, yep.
Okay.
Okay, other comments from the site visit? Joe?
I did have one comment. Will there be any like local businesses utilized during the construction of the properties, or is it all being sourced from Maine? Because I know there was I think the cabins were going to be brought in.
No, there will be local construction as well. It's
There will
not, they're not, the whole thing isn't appearing on trailers and being pumped
okay.
down. They're-
Right.
But portions of it are being prefabricated that will be assembled locally.
Okay, I do want to say, I thought it was actually very helpful. Often site visits just confirm what you already knew, but I thought actually getting down in that, I haven't been on the first hole since the 50,000th golf ball I've lost there, so, it's actually a beautiful spot, and it is very secluded. I didn't have a clear sense of how secluded that is, and it is a lovely and separate area, so I think it actually fits really the mission and the purpose of being nestled in a community. I felt nestled was actually the right word for it, so thank you for that visit, and certainly the drawings as depicted were more so I think that works. So can I, any other comments on the site visit?
Are we still awaiting the more information about the construction schedule? I thought I saw somewhere in the documents that that's still due to us.
So for the applicant's submission for this month, they submitted a lighting plan, which was the only new information, and they noted in their cover letter that they were going to get back to us about the construction logistics and details for the December submission.
So do we think that that's an important input to the public hearing? Thank you for raising that, Heidi.
I mean, we'll have it in advance of the hearing. It'll be submitted for the December deadline, so it'll be something that we have.
Well, when you say "we," the public hearing, the "we" is the public, not we, us. So we, the public, would need some chance to digest things. So
You can always continue the hearing if it's not enough information.
I mean, the public, assuming it gets put up on the town's website, the public would have 2 weeks to look at it before the hearing.
I'm inclined to agree with you because the limited attendance at the site visit on Sunday, thank you, leads me to believe that probably would not be that many more people that would come out for the public hearing, probably the same people. And so they'd probably have a sense to read it ahead of time. So, thank you for that. Motion to schedule the public hearing for the December meeting. Thank you, thank you. Laura, first and a second. Comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. We will see the tag team of Hudson Highlands Reserve and Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival yet again on the doubleheader. That will be December 19th.
With our manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
You know, he's a good manager.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you. Okay, so Krasniqi, I'm so sorry, I say that wrong. No, it's my fault, I'm sorry, Krasniqi. Okay, speaking of dueling meetings, we have dueling traffic studies tonight. And I say that with all respect for both studies. I know there's a lot of work that go into those. And I think if you want to make some opening remarks, but I think maybe since we've already consumed your traffic study, and maybe what we'll do is we'll have SLR present their findings, and then I take it you're the traffic study rebutter? Who wrote the rebuttal?
No, Creighton Manning wrote the original traffic study.
Right, and then someone wrote a rebuttal as well, right?
So SLR.
No, SLR wrote and then I got another
Yes.
they wrote a comment letter and we responded to their comment letter.
That's what I'm saying. So there was a study, an alternate study, and then comments on the alternate study.
Yes.
It's like the Talmud here, for those who are Jewish. There's not that many Jews in our town, so that's like, the Talmud is a series of commentaries on different Torah readings. Anyway, next, let's keep going. So maybe you want to say a couple opening remarks. Anthony will comment about, or give the summary of their report. Then if you want to come and give your comments, and we'll do our best to figure out who's on first.
All right. I'll make, just some very brief.
Sorry.
Probably easier if you have Anthony come up so that he can speak to the mic.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have, he wants to make some intro remarks.
Yeah, but don't you want to seat him?
What?
Don't you want to bring him to the dais?
Oh, sure, Anthony can come up to the dais, sure. Sure.
Because
Yeah, sure. I wasn't, Anthony, Steve is minding my manners. Please, come up here and join us at the dais. Thank you. Sorry. I apologize for being inappropriately rude. All right, please, continue.
Good evening.
Or begin.
I'm Adam Thyberg from Insight Engineering, and I'm joined by the applicant, Tim Krasniqi of Krasniqi Plaza LLC, and as mentioned, Mark Nadolny from Creighton Manning, the author of the traffic study that we submitted. So just quickly, since we were last before you, we've responded to Ron's comments. We did receive an updated memo today with, it looks like, just a few kind of graphical, technical comments remaining, so I think we're in pretty good shape there. And of course, of greater interest is our correspondence on traffic. So I was going to introduce Mark, but if you'd like to hear from SLR first, then... Yeah,
why would you, I don't know, it's a hard one to know when you have dueling studies. I think basically we've read your study. If you want to, I'm fine if you want to give the highlights for your study, but we're going to go back and forth a couple of times here. Why don't you come to the mic?
We'll just hit the highlights and
Sure.
we'll go from there.
Hit the highlights of the original study. Let's cover topics like, obviously the sight line is a big topic, the speed, the traffic counts, etc. So why don't you hit the highlights, and then we'll go Anthony, then we'll go back to you, and then the board will ask some questions.
Sounds good. Mark Nadolny, Creighton Manning, and as we've established, we did conduct the original study. SLR, you then asked SLR to provide some comments, and so they went out and did their own observations and then provided some comments to us, and we responded. And like I said, I'm not going to go through every response. There were 19 traffic-related comments, but some of the highlights, SLR did go out and do.
Why don't you just comment on your original study, and then because you can't have you commenting on what they wrote without them talking first. So if you want to just highlight about your original study.
Sure.
You came up with X this and the Y that.
So the original study essentially looked at existing conditions. We did a site distance assessment of the proposed driveway, provided our recommendations for the driveway, and showed what the sight lines actually were. We then looked at trip generation to determine how much traffic would be generated by the site, and then did an analysis of just the driveway itself to say whether or not the driveway would have adequate capacity to enter and exit off of the state route. So the original report was fairly narrow in its scope, and then SLR then asked us to expound on that and provided their own comments, and so we ended up doing that. So I guess that is the very short version of what we did, and if...
Does anyone have any comments on the original study they want to ask? No?
Not as you have.
Yeah, I have one. So I like graphs. They help me focus the thoughts. I'm particularly taken, I assume this is your original, this is from your original work.
Correct.
And I'm pointing for those at home to a chart with white, yellow, and red, which means good, less good, and not so good.
Correct.
So this chart, I think the language you used was, quote, site driveway, the proposed site driveway on US Route 9 is less than desirable but not critically limited. I assume that's the language for yellow.
Correct.
And this yellow, your green dot, again, it's the green dot is just on the edge of the scary red area. So I'm just trying to understand the framing, quote, less than desirable but not critically limited. Particularly when you look at, as you correctly noted, this existing utility pole.
Correct.
That makes me nervous. So just give me a little more in your professional opinion why this is, quote, less than desirable but not critically limited. Can you just expand
Sure.
upon
We
that?
are- New York State DOT has guidelines in order to, provide a driveway and safe conditions for a driveway on their facility. And they refer to a guidance called AASHTO. And AASHTO says, based on a speed and your design vehicle, we want to see X number of feet down the road in order to provide adequate sight distance. And those are guidelines and guidance to say, this is what you're trying to achieve. But there's a minimum that you need to have, or else, it's not safe. And so that line is to say, look, we would generally not go below that line. If we were below that line, we would try to move it around, move the driveway to get it above that line. And if you were below that line,
So that line being
the red, to get into the red area.
The red is being the line, or the white and
The
yellow?
red, the red is the
Okay,
critical.
got it, fine.
So if you're into the red, that's when you start to say, what we need to provide some mitigation. And that mitigation could be relocating the driveway, or it could be providing some signage. And that signage could be an intersection warning sign. Everyone's seen those, or the big yellow signs that look like a T or an X, or a cross. And it alerts drivers that there is you're approaching an intersection that has less than desirable sight distance. Now, so that's not to say you can't put a sign or a driveway there. That happens all over the place, and we've shown in our follow-up that utility pole, it's not like a wall. If you move up 2 feet and you move back 2 feet, you see around the utility pole. That condition exists all over Route 9, all up and down through the entire town, through the entire county. And motorists will, they're not sitting at a stagnant point, which is what we measure from, which is 14 and a half feet back from the travel way. A motorist, if they see a pole in their way, they can move up a little bit, they can move back a little bit, and they can see around it. In our supplemental assessment, we show those sight lines that you're not stuck at this red line here. You can see above or past that utility pole if you move forward or don't move up as far, which is what driver behavior is. But from the letter of the law, we have to put our cone at 14 and a half foot back, and that utility pole is kind of in your line. And so again, we're not critically limited. We could, DOT is reviewing this because we need a New York State DOT highway work permit, and they could say, yeah, you know what, have the applicant pay for an intersection warning sign. The reason why the driveway is where it is we're trying to maximize the distance from the existing unsignalized driveway to the north. So if we moved it away from the pole, now you're getting closer to the unsignalized intersection to the north. And in our opinion, and most likely DOT's opinion, they'd rather have it further away from that unsignalized intersection than trying to, mitigate some pole issue that you can do by having the driver move forward or back, which they will do to see around the pole. So that's essentially what it is. Like I said, it's not a shall, you cannot put the driveway there. It's just, these are what we're trying to meet. And
Okay. Are there any other questions, board members, on the historic or the original traffic study?
What exactly does it mean for the drivers to look around the pole? Are they inching their car forward?
So say this microphone is the pole.
Yeah.
And that is right in your line of sight. If you moved your car up a foot and a half, you're now seeing around the pole. If you don't move up the 14 and a half feet back, you're looking on the other side of the pole. So the pole is here, it's right in my line of sight, but here it's not. Here it's not. And so the driver can do that. The driver does have some leeway, but AASHTO has determined that in general, motorists will pull up 14 and a half feet from the travel way. They have to establish a point for us to put that pole, or put our cone to say, oh, okay, this is where you have to do it from. But motorist behavior is they'll look around the pole if need be, and they do that all over the state, on state facilities.
Okay, great. So with that in mind then, Anthony, could you give us, I guess I describe as the major points of departure you have from Creighton Manning, knowing that you're both licensed and professional, and so I'm not trying to say who's better, who's worse, but you have a slightly different perspective on a few things. So would you highlight the major areas of difference in your report?
Correct.
Which, just for the public, this board voted 3 months ago to request a separate study given questions not about the quality, but just about a difference of opinion. So, Anthony, and just state your firm, please, and say.
Anthony Russo with the firm SLR Consulting. We're out of New Paltz. So thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it. I'll do exactly what you said. I received the memo this past Tuesday, the revised response to our comments. But what I did is I did drill down on what I think is the most important issue, which I think is safety, and which has to do with the sight lines. And that really gets to page 2 of the SLR comment letter dated September 25th. So, as was mentioned by the applicant's traffic engineer, what governs safety coming out of a driveway, sight distance, is something called the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, AASHTO. And they set recommendations for what is safe if you're making a left turn out of a driveway and you're making a right turn out of a driveway. So let's first take the left turn. So when you're making a left turn, you have to look two ways. You got to look to your left, and you got to look to your right when you're making a left turn, in this case. So the other thing that we asked the applicant to do, which was not in the original study, was to consider truck traffic. The original one did not look at truck traffic separately, looked at autos. So when you look at truck traffic, and you're looking at a left turn, if you're looking to your right, what is available is 110 feet. And that assumes that given the speed, which is 55 miles per hour, that was the 85th percentile speed. And what is recommended by AASHTO is 930 feet. So that's about 120 feet short of what is recommended by AASHTO.
Sorry, this name, AASHTO, is the same name?
Yes.
Can you guys say what the acronym is?
That is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials.
Okay.
And that is used by all traffic engineers throughout the country.
What was that number again? You said 110 is what you had, and what do you recommend is what?
What available is if you were making a left turn and you're looking right, what was available was 110 feet, and what's recommended was 930 feet. We're talking trucks here.
What's available is 810 feet.
810 feet, and what's recommended is 930 feet.
Yes, so what's available is 810, so yes, it's not 110 feet, it's 810 feet.
810 feet, excuse me.
Yes, okay.
810 feet, and what's recommended is 930 by AASHTO. So it's short by 120 feet. And again, this is for truck traffic. Now, if you're making a left turn out and you're looking to your left, what is available is 800 feet, and what's recommended is 930 feet. So that's 130 feet short again. So making a left turn out, although they say it's not critically limiting, they are short of what AASHTO recommends and what New York State DOT follows by between 120, 130 feet for a left turn out of the driveway. When making the right turn, okay, what is available is 800 feet, and they're close. What's recommended is 850 feet, so they're about 50 feet short. So for both movements coming out of the driveway, sight distance, what's available and what's recommended by AASHTO and DOT, they're short, especially with the left turn, which is probably the most problematic turn because you have to cross 2 lanes of traffic. The other issue is they mentioned that a possible, measure to mitigate this issue is to put up the warning sign driveway ahead, which again, as mentioned before, is like, the sign, yellow sign with the T on it. However, based on what was stated in the applicant's traffic study, they did not meet the requirement that DOT would allow that type of sign to be put on the roadway. It did not meet warrants. The state does not allow you to put anything on the highway, whether it's a traffic signal or a sign, unless it meets the criteria that they set to put that sign in. So they said it does not meet that requirement according to their study, other responses to our comments. The other thing that they mentioned is that you could request of DOT a reduction in speed. So therefore, lower the speed, then what would happen is that they might meet the recommended sight distance from AASHTO. However, the study stated again that it's unlikely that DOT would want to reduce the speed. So given the fact that you do not meet what's recommended for sight distance for both left turn and right turn for trucks, and they do not meet the warrant to put in the driveway warning sign, and in their opinion, that DOT probably will not reduce the speed, then you're kind of out of mitigation measures in a way. The other thing that was mentioned is that in their studies that people may not obey signs anyway. So how effective they are. They, in their own study, question the effectiveness of the signs. So I think that the sight distance, to me, in my opinion, with all due respect, is a limiting factor. The other thing that I would like to mention is some observations that we conducted out in the field, is that if you're on East Mountain Road and you're a resident or you're visiting, we made some timing observations. How long does it take people to get off that road onto 9? Some cases, you know, it was 30 seconds. In some cases, it was over 2.5 minutes. Now, I understand the applicants made the point that our traffic volumes may be higher than what's usual because it's construction on Route 9D, but I would say that traffic volumes, whether it's the traffic volumes from the original study from the applicant or it's any traffic volumes they presented historically from DOT, traffic volumes are high on this part of Route 9. The speed is high, and that's why sometimes it takes people a long time to make a turn off East Mountain Road. I also noticed that some people abandoned making a left turn because they couldn't stand waiting anymore, and they made a right turn. And how they got back south, I don't know, because that was their intention to go south. And I did also notice that some people, you know, made a turn in a gap, which means an opening in traffic, that was pretty tight. And that's a car, a truck, and that's why we made them look at sight distance for a truck. It's more difficult for a truck to make that turn because they're slower and they're heavier. The other concern is, given how close the proposed driveway is to East Mountain Road, if someone is turning left out of the proposed project site driveway, and then someone is turning left out of East Mountain Road, they could be pretty much on top of each other very quickly as they merge onto 9. And I don't think that was taken into consideration as part of the responses. The other thing that was noticed when cars are queued to make a turn, in this case from Route 9 to East Mountain Road, that some cars, and they shouldn't do it, but they do it, they go on the shoulder. So now if you have this project site driveway and you have a truck that wants to turn in per se, and it's bigger and it's wider, and then somebody wants to try the unsafe practice, it's going to be the potential again there is another safety issue, because they may not be able to maneuver around them safely. They could hit the guardrail, they could hit the truck. So, you know, I just see a number of issues with the driveway, given the fact for trucks, they don't meet the requirement in AASHTO. I also see issues with how close it is to East Mountain Drive and potential conflicts with turns out of the driveway and turns out of East Mountain Drive. I also have concerns about the fact that in DOT, the only thing I saw in the Appendix C, which was DOT correspondence, was DOT actually asked, has the town, and I would assume the applicant, have they considered putting the driveway on East Mountain Road? Which means if they're asking that question, DOT, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the assumption is if they're asking the question to move the driveway, potentially, have you evaluated it, they may have concerns too about it being on Route 9. Because why would they ask the question? So, you know, I think there's a lot of things here that need to be addressed. There's other parts of their responses that we have to go through. I need time to do that, but I think this is the most critical issue, and I think that also DOT needs to weigh in on a lot of these issues as well. They should see all the correspondence, and I assume that they do, I'm not certain, from the applicant, you know, and the back and forth that we have with the applicant's traffic engineer. So that's kind of a summary of the highlights that I see that are issues that I think that the board should consider.
Good, thank you, Anthony. I was going to say, so do board members want to ask questions, or should we go right to the response from our, let's do that. Let's, board members, questions for Anthony, please.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I fully agree with your review of it, especially item C7. no one goes 55 on that road. And I've been in so many close calls, making a left-hand turn onto East Mountain Road north, going south. And people pass me on the right-hand side, on the shoulder, full speed. So what you said is 100% true. And it's a big concern, and it's a very, very much potential for danger.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
It's a comment, not a question.
That's fine. Other board members' comments or questions?
So can I just ask, I know that you wrote here, so it's, so the DOT uses a 0.25% growth factor, but now with Danes Lumber is somewhat active, do we have any sort of comparison and understand if there's any increase in traffic from before Danes and now?
Well,
Because I think sorry, just to say, because I think in the report, what they say is that the factor, because they did that analysis, and they said that the factor was within the means of what is expected from the DOT. So just wanting to understand the aggregate of like that growth, because we're seeing Danes kind of like working, like in operation.
The applicant presented historical data from New York State DOT, which they show that traffic volumes have been actually going down in the area. So they stated that a 0.25% was actually conservative. We went out and did counts in September of this year, and our counts were considerably higher than what was presented in the applicant's traffic study. We also pointed out the applicant did their original counts at a time when school was not in full session. The applicant made a point, which is something we could discuss with DOT, and it's a very fair point, that they think that our numbers are higher than anything they've seen historically from DOT because of the construction at Breakneck, that people could be diverting over from 9D to 9, and that's what made our numbers higher. So is that correct? It could be, but that's, a question that we could have with DOT.
Other questions or comments? Joe, anything? No? Heidi?
I was just wondering if, I know that some people now have kind of switched their habits to using 9, like my daughter, for example. I mean, the closure of 9D has caused her to, change her behavior. I don't know that she's gonna go back to you. I'm not so sure that the level, I take the applicant's point, but I don't know, I think, the number, the volume probably will not return to the pre-breakneck closure levels anyway. I think that they're going to have increased as a result of the closure, probably relatively permanently. From just anecdotal, I suppose, but that's human behavior.
Okay. Other comments? So Anthony, I have one question for you. Again, I asked earlier, I'm sorry, your name again, sir, is first name? Mark. I asked Mark this question about this graph, which has got their green dot just on the little edge of the red danger zone. Did you use a similar analytic, and where would your dot be? Well, it's not a joke. I'm totally serious. I'm being a little funny, but it's the same. It's a real question, which is this has. So I can read this as percentile approach speed, as Dennis was just talking about, and it has sight distance. So does your analytic have them in the same place, or is there a different view of the analytic?
I have a different view of the analytic.
And where would your dot be?
My dot would be red.
Red.
And the reason my dot would be red is because they do not, as I said, they do not meet AASHTO. And that's assuming that always the vegetation is kept clear. That's also assuming the person makes the adjustment around the pole, which they can. I also brought up the issue at night. The pole may not be visible at night. So they said that headlights from the cars would illuminate the pole, and they would also provide lighting on site that would change where it would illuminate the pole. That assumes that DOT is okay with that, because DOT doesn't want any light spillage onto their road. The other thing too, at 85th percentile, and that's what's used, 85% of the cars on that road will travel at 55 miles or less. But there's also going to be 15% that are going to go faster, right? So when you get to faster, that's when you could get into the red.
So if this
And they're right on the borderline right now.
Right. If this pole was not there, well, let's assume the vegetation was taken care of by
I would assume
these guys
Yes.
put some money in escrow, and there's a permanent mowing operation there, just for that aside. But this pole, is this pole the sole problem then with the site distance?
No, I think it's part of it, and I think the main issue is the speed on the road, the horizontal curve as you're coming north, which limits sight distance, not meeting the recommended AASHTO standard, and the proximity of how close they are to East Mountain Road, and observations of how difficult it is for cars to make turns, left turns on East Mountain Road. And honestly, being out there, just making an observation that is not in numbers and it's not in graphs. I've seen some people like make hold your breath type of moves.
Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get at what is in their control and what is not. So let's just make, if it wasn't a curve further north, would this be less of a problem? Obviously, we can't change a curve in the road, but I'm just trying to, is the curve the big problem? Is it the proximity to a residential street, East Mountain Road North?
Okay,
Or is it?
Okay, I'll take your question. If the curve wasn't there, they would have better sight distance, and I still think they would be short. The issue is, again, the speed and the proximity to East Mountain Road.
So if there wasn't, so which is, again, I'm sorry I'm pressing you, but if the curve was the same, but they weren't proximate to this residential road, East Mountain Road North, would it be okay? And the pole wasn't there, would it be okay?
It would still get back to the speed and not meeting AASHTO. I mean, it's a circular type of thing.
I get it. No,
Because there's so many buttons here that are not being pressed, in my view.
The reason why I'm suggesting this is because this board has been wrestling with the growth of new developments, commercial developments on Route 9 since before I was the chair. I think when you guys joined when we had, what's the name of it again, south of 301? CRS. And we had lots and lots of debates. It had a hill, it had a curve, it had trucks, and we had a split vote on approving that, and there was a lot of gnawing, public hearings, et cetera. We ultimately approved it, but the building was never built, from what I can gather. So here we are 5 years later, 6 years later, in the same issue, but it seems like it's mounting with traffic, and this particular location seems to have some issues.
Especially with the trucks, because that was not part of the first assessment. That's why it was requested. When you got to the trucks, that's when you see the deficiency in the meeting the recommended site distance.
All right, so Mark, let me come back to you, because I know you spent a lot of time. I saw the thickest of the submissions is the rebuttal to the rebuttal. It got bigger and bigger. So, you're doing right by your client by having that kind of evidence. So could you just maybe, you feel free to respond to Anthony's responses.
So, the guidelines that Anthony's talking about are these AASHTO guidelines. Again, these are not set in stone. They're not shall conditions that you have to have 930 feet. This is what we're striving for. Almost very few driveways will meet that 930 feet. And essentially, what AASHTO is saying is that there's two different types of sight distance. There's intersection sight distance, that's looking left and right to get in and out, and there's stopping sight distance. And stopping sight distance is the critical one, meaning that I have to have enough distance to actually come to a complete stop if someone pulls out in front of me. And that's the critical one. That's the safety one where Anthony said he's concerned about safety, is that we have enough distance for someone to come to a complete stop. So if someone pulls out in front of them, they can stop and they wouldn't hit them. So from a safety standpoint, I'm comfortable that there's enough stopping sight distance for someone to be able to come to a stop. Now, AASHTO, the reason why AASHTO has intersection sight distance is that so that when someone pulls out in front of someone, you're not unduly impacting the traveling public. So if you're pulling out in front of someone, they're not always slowing down from 55 miles an hour down to 20 miles an hour. They don't want people to do that all the time. So, and it's longer for a truck, because a truck takes a lot longer to get up to speed. So it's not, so if a truck pulls out in front of someone, they're not going to all of a sudden hit the back of them because there's not enough sight distance. It's just they're going to have to slow down a little bit more than from 55. They may have to slow down to 45 or 30. So it's not so much of a safety issue. It's that they're just going to have to slow down more than we typically would want them to. So that's the difference between the two sight distance. So if safety is the issue, there's enough stopping site, there's enough site distance that someone can come to a complete stop. Now, you would refer back to this chart here where we had the green dot. That green dot, again, is the distance if I stood here and that pole was in my way and I didn't move. If I did this, which we all kind of agreed that that's what drivers do, that dot now goes way up. So we're not now near that critical issue of stopping site distance of there's a safety issue. We're not talking about a safety issue. We're talking about an issue of creating undue delay to someone traveling 55 miles an hour down Route 9. We may make them slow down a little bit, but it's not like they're going to run into the back of the truck. So, and we're not talking about a really heavy generator here. We're talking, 10 cars an hour. So that's one every 6 minutes. So it's not like this is a retail development that's got, hundreds of cars coming in and out of there and people are going to continually having to slow down for them. We're talking about one truck every, 10 minutes exiting this site. So we're not talking about a real big delay, and we're not talking about necessarily safety. We're just talking about, are we going to delay people driving 55 miles an hour and making them slow down to 35 miles an hour? So the trucks are going to have enough gaps to get out. It's just, it's not 1,000 feet. And we're trying to get 1,000 feet, but very few driveways get 1,000 feet. So those AASHTO guidelines, that's what they are. They're guidelines. They're not shall conditions. The shall conditions are the stopping site distance where someone has to come to a complete stop, and that's the red area. And so we've sort of shown that we're well above the red area once you sort of kind of jockey around that utility pole. So that's my first comment in terms of the site distance. And in terms of the sign doesn't necessarily meet a warrant. I know Anthony said that DOT won't let you put it in if it doesn't meet a warrant. We go to DOT all the time and say, look, we feel like an intersection warning sign should be considered here. And we use that language a lot. Just, it should be considered. And DOT will say, yes, we agree. So if DOT feels that like the sign should go in there, there's nothing that's going to stop them from doing that. It's not like a lot of times we'll talk about traffic signals and not meeting warrants for a traffic signal. DOT won't install a traffic signal unless you really meet the warrants. A sign like this, I've done this for 24 years. I've had them install signs that are not meeting the letter of the law site distance numbers. And Anthony did talk about going out and observing conditions out there, and we really feel that the construction going on at Breakneck Tunnel is having a really big impact on Route 9 compared to what we observed. We're not talking 50 cars, 100 cars. We're talking about a 700 to 800 car difference from what we observed from typical conditions to what they observed. So that is a massive change to the character of what was going on Route 9 and the types of gaps that people normally see on Route 9. So we feel that SLR went out and observed it, but they observed in atypical conditions. So you can't, it's an apples and oranges comparison. So they're comparing their analysis to ours, and we're not really comparing the same thing. And so that's why we're struggling with saying, well, yeah, they're waiting out there 2.5 minutes. I agree, they're probably doing that right now. But in 6 months when Breakneck opens up, people are going to find the fastest path. And if they felt that the fastest path before this was using Route 9D, that's what they're going to go back to. The only reason why they're doing it now, going to Route 9, is because it takes way longer on Route 9D. So if over the years they've determined that 9D is the fastest path, they're going to go back to that once it's open. So I think driver behavior has already been established because that's what's been done historically. In DOT, we've got 5 different data points north and south of this site that all are consistent with what we observed. And that's 700 to 800 vehicles less than what SLR observed, a couple months later after 9D was sort of closed for that one-way condition. So, we're again, I feel like we're sort of kind of going back and forth on a...
We are definitely going back and forth by design.
Yes. And then let's see, in terms of the spacing to the existing Old Post Road, East Mountain Road driveway, I mean, we're within DOT spacing guidelines. I mean, DOT has a minimum distance that you need to be away from an intersection, and we're well past that. We're 200 feet away. There's lots of driveways near unsignalized intersections, and they have to meet these DOT guidelines, and we're past that. So, those guidelines are out there, so there is not turning conflicts, entering and exiting the, driveways that are too close to each other, and we're well past those DOT guidelines. So, I'd love to talk with Anthony after, to get on the phone and have some additional conversations, because I don't think we're gonna necessarily solve anything here tonight.
We're not, let's pause there. So let me turn to Steve. Steve, can you just give us, within our code, we've been presented with a traffic study that effectively says from the applicant, it's fine. There's some it's not great, but it's fine. We have we hired someone to give us a study that says it's not so fine, effectively, and there's some concerns. What are the degrees of freedom this board has, given that input?
Well, you haven't got all the input yet. You still need to hear from Anthony as far as his review and response of their documents. But let's say that nothing changes as far as that review goes. You should listen to your own consultants, but you're not bound to do so. You can disagree with them and find otherwise if you want. The standard that you're held to is a reasonably safe project design and compliance with good and accepted engineering standards. So that's what you're going to be looking at in terms of entrance and exit from this property and what's safe and what can be allowed and to what degree.
Anthony, did you want to add anything to the rebuttal?
Well,
without repeating what your analysis it is.
they do meet stopping sight distance. That's why I did not mention it, but they do. I stepped to what was important. I still stand by that exiting the driveway is extremely important for safety as well. To just re-emphasize that.
Understood.
In terms of people's driving patterns, what happens after 90, I can't speak to that.
Understood. So here's what.
And I also, the other thing we ended up doing was looking at accidents on Route 9. That was another thing. So we looked a mile north and south of the site to see what types of crashes are currently experienced on Route 9. There's 51 crashes in 2 miles over the last 3 years in the 2 miles, with a mile north and south of the site. And there was, no pet accidents, no bike accidents, no fatalities, a lot of rear end stuff, a lot of animal type collisions, guide rails, debris. And then we also looked at the crashes that are currently entering and exiting Old Post Road and East Mountain Road, and there was 5 crashes at that location. 2 were rear ends, and they were involved during a construction zone, so it was atypical conditions. There was some flaggers and stuff out there, and so that was not typical. There was a collision with a fixed object in order to avoid an animal. There was a some sort of a head-on where someone didn't stay on the right side of the road, and then there was a right angle associated with some poor weather conditions. So there was no pattern at that intersection. So I mean, I've done this long enough to where
your recitation was supposed to lead to what conclusion? I didn't.
So I guess the conclusion is you've got a driveway. The existing intersection is not showing a crash pattern. There's not there's not 10 right angle crashes coming off of East Mountain Road now. We're not adding a lot of traffic, so we're not going to change the condition of East Mountain Road. There's not a lot of southbound rear end accidents currently occurring at the intersection. We're not adding that much traffic. We're talking 10 to 15 trips at that intersection over the course of an hour. So we're not changing conditions. So the road itself is actually below DOT average crash rates for a similar facility. So again, you had asked us to look at crashes, and I forgot to mention it before. So that is just another piece of the puzzle where we're not seeing crash patterns for other intersections that will have similar type levels of traffic.
Okay, I have a thought on a recommendation as the next step, but I may open to my colleagues on the board who may have some other ideas. So thoughts, having heard actually, let me say one more thing before I turn to my colleagues. I appreciate both your work. I think it's, you don't see that a lot. I work at a consulting firm. I'm generally not hired by, there's not, a client hires us and then the applicant or the other side hires another consulting firm. We have it out in public about how we're both like doing math. So I'm impressed by both of you having a thoughtful, mature, and fact-based discussion about different perspectives. So thank you for that. I don't think we've done that before as a board, so that was kind of impressive to watch, so thank you. So thoughts on next steps among my colleagues? Again, I have an idea, but let me open to you all first. Joe? You seem like you were ready to say something. Okay.
No.
All right. Gang?
I'm still digesting this.
Digesting, yeah.
Me too.
I think I need to just kind of understand how we're gonna get through this.
Right. Right.
Can I add one thing?
Oh,
to my
please.
comment?
Sure.
One one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that this is currently under review by DOT, who's ultimately going to issue a highway work permit for this work. It's under review. It is with DOT right now. So I think probably the most constructive way for us to move forward is for Mark's team and for SLR to have an offline conversation with any feedback that's forthcoming from DOT. And then I think with those three parties in a room, a solution, might be able to be found.
Steve, thoughts on that?
No, it sounds like a great idea as far as that goes.
Very collaborative. Please,
I was just wondering the timeframe.
With
That you would expect, I know you
With
can't.
DOT, it's difficult to say. We've had our latest submission into them. So with DOT, there's three stages. You put in an initial preliminary. They give it a quick look. That we're in the second stage now, which is more of the technical review. It's more of the substantive review.
Offline discussion.
What's that?
For the offline discussion.
I think Creighton Manning and SLR could have that discussion at any time, but I think any feedback that's forthcoming from DOT would help guide that discussion.
I'm going to make an additional suggestion. It's not an obligation, but it is a request. And I know the Krasniqi family has probably been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of work on this. I wouldn't mind if you would take the feedback and possibly go back to the factory a little bit and just think about what could be done, if anything. If you told me there's nothing we can do, we can't move the driveway, we can't add more, they won't let us add signs, so we're kind of stuck, that's fine, but I would take the feedback. Obviously, the effort has been spent and inputs have been given, so if you can take the input, as anything you can do with it, I think that would be useful while we await.
We're 100% committed to coming up with the best option for moving forward, but there's a lot of moving parts that push and pull each other in different directions.
You're the experts, I'm just giving you some advice.
And we're looking to get to the best conclusion we can, and of course, we welcome any, feedback and
Interim, we're going to wait
collaboration.
for DOT and proceed from there.
If I may ask the applicant one question, if it's...
Please.
Okay. I don't know if you consider asking DOT, forget changing the speed limit, but have you asked DOT about a warning speed reduction sign as you come up that way? Has that been discussed?
It has not been discussed. I think that since it's a state road, that would have to come from the town. I think we didn't mention that. Oh, I'm sorry. We did mention that, that request would likely have to come from the town, and we didn't note that we are right in the middle of a speed transition area. So, while DOT may not lower the speed limit for all of Route 9, maybe they'll relocate where the transition from 55 to 45 is, so you might be able to push that a little further away. But again, I don't think that's something that a private applicant can go to DOT and ask them to do. I think that's more of a town request.
And I was thinking, a speed warning sign, which is not a change in the speed limit at where the horizontal curve is as people come up so they slow down.
A speed warning sign, I mean, there's really not a curve. I mean, you could do like a driver feedback sign maybe, like, that says your speed is, 60 miles an hour instead of 40.
That's an option if DOT, if you thought about it, that's an option to maybe discuss with DOT.
Anyway, you guys are going to get, both firms are going to join with DOT when they come, so I think we've got our plan for now, which is DOT. And if SLR needs to meet with Creighton Manning in the interim to share any thoughts, you have our consent and appreciation for that. Hearing anything more on this topic? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Mark. When it Vasta, are we covering Vasta tonight? No, there's no Vasta. No Vasta. Okay, let me make a comment on KPB. Okay. The entire board ventured on to a property that had originally had some violations, and we were there to help provide a site plan to get everything back to right, as well as approve some new activity. We did not, the board stood around and no one showed up. And so we're gonna have to reschedule that site visit. And I think we're gonna wait till January, because I don't know what's gonna happen in December, and I think we'll just, let's get the applicant there. He or she would be nice to see at his or her property.
I spoke with him. He will be at the next.
Okay. Hopefully he doesn't live right there, because if he lived there and he just was inside the house, that's even more infuriating.
I'm sorry,
No.
what did he say?
He said he'll be there.
I reiterated that you would like him to. I wasn't there. I should have been there. I had it in my calendar for 10 o'clock instead of 9:30.
Well, I appreciate you taking that, that honesty. It means a lot, Margaret. Thank you. So let's get it scheduled for January. Can we get a date? We have to reschedule it because someone's gonna tell us what the hell we're looking at.
Let's go on the first snow day.
My goal, that was what we did, I think that was our goal for the first Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. We went for maximum snowdrift.
So January after the new year would be the 5th or the 12th? Sunday.
Well, let's see, of my colleagues here, who's around, the 5th? Is that the 5th? Oh, it's 5th, sorry. The 5th. Oh, I'm in Mexico. You guys can meet without me.
But it wouldn't be the same.
It'd be better. It'd be better, probably more efficient.
I'm okay either day.
12th, the 5th of the 12th.
Oh, I can't do the 12th, so 5th is better for me.
5th? Yeah. 5th.
Still 9:30?
9:30.
Okay.
Send everyone, including Margaret, an invite, and you'll let me know how it goes. Okay? And that's it.
Thank you.
Unless you want to, do you have anything you want to talk about? Is it worthwhile?
No, there's really no changes.
Let's just do it. Well, I think it's gonna be important because I think the topography, and by the way, sorry, I did speak to Andy Gower, and they did do a site visit with you.
No, but I went to the meeting last week, and Andy said he looked at the plans, and basically, there's no disturbance in the steep slopes area, so he doesn't have any comment.
That's different. Anyway, I think that's fine. Well, it's different than what he said. But anyway, we'll have a formal memo at some point.
He did.
He's got, maybe he has more information, that's it. Anyway, all right, so any new business then? Sorry, anything else, Margaret? No. Good. Any new business? So we're gonna see each other in December for,
19.
I can't remember, no, I was gonna say, are we doing 2 public hearings now? We're doing both? Oh, that's right, the double header of Hudson's. And we thank Liz for staying to the very minute, a volunteer of volunteers, just here to listen. We admire that, thank you. What? That's Liz. Liz Corio.
I'm sorry,
She's a planning board groupie. She thinks this is like really cool. She's our first groupie we've had, so it's exciting. It means a lot. Anyway, all right, slow down. Motion to adjourn. Thank you. Second. What? Yeah, all in favor. All right, great. Thank you very much. See you in December.